everyone. This is Rachel Johnston. Thank you for joining us for the last day of the BWC TTA National Meeting. This next session is digital evidence management. What do we do with all the footage? I'm now going to turn it over to Craig Uchida. Craig?
Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm Craig Uchida. I'm the president of Justice and Security Strategies. We are one of the co-partners in providing technical assistance and training to BWC grantees and others across the country. It's great to be here today, and thank you all for joining us. I hope we can keep this lively, and if you would please send questions forward, we're happy to answer them. There's a lot of information here that we're going to provide, and obviously the slides will be available to you, but if you want some direct answers, please use the chat to send questions to us. So what I'd like to do is give you an overview of what we're doing, and actually also introduce my fellow panelists, but we will talk about a digital evidence management project we've been working on through the TTA program. We'll talk about body-worn cameras in Glendale, Arizona. We'll talk about BWCs and the prosecutor. We'll take questions, and we have our contact information up for you as well. So as I said, I'm Craig Uchida. I'm a researcher. I've done a lot of studies on body-worn cameras. I also work directly with police agencies. So I'm located in Los Angeles right now. I work with the LAPD. We also work in Miami and other places too. With me today is Dr. Michael White. Mike's a professor at Arizona State University. He's the co-director of the BWC TTA project. I'm also going to pitch Mike's book, and it's called Cops, Cameras, and Crisis. And I know I shouldn't be doing this, but it's a good book. It's a good read. I will say this, it's an easy read too, that it's not heavily laden with researchy things, although it does have a number of tables. It explains things very well in terms of the evidence that we have with respect to body-worn cameras, and lays things out in an easy to read fashion. So Mike, I just want to congratulate you on publishing the book, and also let you know that I really enjoyed reading it too. So take that for yourself as well. Our other panelist here is Kalpesh Chotai. Cal is with the State Attorney's Office in Broward County, and he actually oversees the digital evidence unit that exists within the Broward County State Attorney's Office. That again, because of the large amount of digital evidence coming across the board, not only to police departments, but also to prosecutors' offices, they stood up a separate unit, and he'll talk about what they do and how they do things. So part of what I want to talk to you about briefly is the digital evidence management project we've been working on for a little over a year and a half now. This project came to us through John Markovic. John talked extensively and continues to do so about the amount of evidence and digitized evidence that's coming to police agencies. And in particular, we started to see how body-worn camera footage starts to accumulate, and how it starts to affect a number of things within police agencies, but also across the criminal justice system. And so we began this project, as I said, about 2019 actually now, and we've been studying a number of police agencies across the country, as well as prosecutor offices. Next slide as well. So let me quickly define what we mean by all of this. And this is why we say, okay, what do we do with all of that footage, right? That what we're talking about here is information and data that are of value to not only a formal investigation of a crime, but also of administrative uses that police departments are now doing with body-worn camera footage. So it's anything that's stored on, received, or transmitted through an electronic device. Obviously, that's pretty broad. It means computers, tablets, phones, all kinds of things. And the importance of this is that police departments, prosecutors, cities have seen this increase in digital evidence over the years, and the amount of it that's starting to compile is somewhat mind-boggling, and we'll show you examples of that in terms of numbers in a second here. We're talking about cell phones, we're talking about in-car video, we're talking about internet communications, we're also talking about forensic evidence, all kinds of things now that are being scanned and used across the board. So for our purposes, what we wanted to do is to identify what's going on, right? What's going on within police agencies and criminal justice agencies with respect to digital evidence, and in particular, obviously, on body-worn cameras. So we've started to review the current state of collecting and storing footage, as well as retrieving and using and disseminating footage. And we're working clearly with the partners involved with the training and TA program. So what is it we're doing? We're engaged in three basic steps. First, we're examining how footage is used in 7 jurisdictions. We're basically asking each jurisdiction to help us track the number of videos at each stage of the process, and then to determine the issues and challenges they have at each of the stages as well. And so what we're doing is, in these 7 sites, we're looking at a variety of things, and this is the beauty of this project in a number of ways. That obviously we've got Fort Lauderdale and Broward County, which is a medium-sized agency. Glendale is smaller. Harris County Sheriff's is a large sheriff's office. LAPD is a large metropolitan police department. Phoenix, Arizona is also large. Rochester is a small to medium-sized agency. So we're trying to get a broad scope of departments, as well as what their linkages are to prosecutor offices and the other facets of the criminal justice system. This gives you an idea of the number of officers, the number of body-worn camera videos, and the amount of storage space that they used in 2019. So I'll just highlight a couple of these, and in particular, Broward County, the state attorney's office doesn't have officers, but in 2019, they received 175,000 body-worn camera videos. And that amounted to 87.4 terabytes of storage space. Glendale has 300 officers and 20,000 videos, so much smaller amount, but also has a large number of storage space needed for those videos. I work here in LA, and the department has 7,000 officers, obviously one of the larger agencies in the country. 4 million videos were taken in 2019, and that amounts to 1.3 petabytes, and that's 4 million in 1 year. So that's the kind of breadth of numbers of videos and storage that's being used on an annual basis in these police agencies, and also it extends clearly to the state attorney's office. So we're looking at these questions. What are the key challenges? How does and how can digital evidence also be integrated with other types of technology? And to what extent and what ways do implementation technologies or implemented technologies address or define these issues? One of the things I'll mention too is we should have our report in the next couple of months. So in the summer, we should have a report on each of these sites and give you a better idea of what we're studying and doing. I want to just show you quickly the footage flow chart that we're engaged in. And this just tracks where we're going and what we're doing with it. And Mike will go into much greater detail with this. This is the LAPD flow chart. So it's going to have a lot more things on it than most agencies overall. But it does include the basics that I think a lot of you are going to be looking at and going to have as you embark on your journey towards implementation of body-worn cameras. Those of you who already have body-worn cameras, you may already know how this flows. And from the far left, we're talking about encounters, to uploading, to arrests, to the criminal justice system. And within that, you have different compliance checks, you have arrests, you have use of force, and you also have some dissemination of that footage. So I'm going to turn this over to Mike. Mike will go into more detail about what's happening in Glendale and walk you through, I think, that flow chart, but give emphasis about what's important and what they're doing in Glendale. So Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Craig. Let's forget about Glendale. They're lame. Let's talk more about my book. Just kidding. Thanks for the shameless plug there. So what I want to do is just kind of put some meat on the bones of some of the things that Craig was talking about with this DEM project. So let's talk about Glendale, Arizona, because that's the department that I've been working with on this particular initiative. So just a little bit of background on Glendale. As Craig said, they're one of the smaller departments that we have involved in this project. If you're not familiar with Glendale, they're in the Phoenix area. They share a border with the city of Phoenix. The population is about 225,000. Their crime rates are both higher than both the national average as well as several neighboring cities, especially with regard to the property crime. Their background in terms of the department and their experience with body-worn cameras, you can see on this slide. So 430 sworn. They were one of the first grantees in this PIP program back in 2015. And it took them about 3 months to roll out the 300 body-worn cameras that they were able to purchase through the PIP program. Since early 2016, they've had that full deployment. As they hire new officers, rookie officers, they receive cameras. And then also if anyone switches assignments, say a detective moves back to patrol, that new or patrol officer, that officer will get a body-worn camera. So they're an Axon user. I would describe the Glendale body-worn camera program as boring in the best way possible. They're seasoned. They operate very efficiently, as you'll see as I talk more about their experiences. And as Craig said, we have reports coming out. So I have a draft Glendale report, which provides much more detail on some of the issues that I'm going to touch on today. And what I'd like to do in the time I have is really focus on two notable features of their program. First is their policy. And you've heard a lot about body-worn camera policy over the last 2 days, and you'll hear more today. I think there are a couple of different aspects of the Glendale policy that are notable and are tied to the efficiency and effectiveness of their program. So I want to talk a bit about that. And then the other thing I want to do is talk about the flow of footage into their department and then where it goes from there. So let's talk about policy first. And in the time I have here, I want to focus on two issues. The first is the decision to activate and deactivate, and then I want to talk a little bit about their robust auditing and compliance system. And you've heard a lot about activation as well. Going back to the keynote from Chief Acevedo, I love that what he said. He'd rather not have cameras at the scene of a critical incident than have them there and not on. So activation obviously is absolutely key, but on the back end, so is deactivation. And Glendale is very, very clear in their policy that the default is to have the camera on and to keep it on. And you can see the quote here from their policy. It is in the best interest of the department and individual officers not to interrupt BWC operation after it's turned on without good cause. So if you're a Glendale police officer and you fail to activate, or you activate and then deactivate during the encounter, you're going to be asked about it, and you better have good reason for doing so. And because of that, I think they've avoided a lot of the controversies that we've seen with other departments, where you have a critical incident and it's not recorded, or there's muting of video, or a deactivation that occurs too early. They've been able to avoid all those things. The other piece I wanted to highlight is the auditing and compliance that they do. And I've worked with a lot of departments, and I would say this is about the most robust system of compliance that I've seen. And there are 3 layers to it. The first you see is fairly common. Most departments do some version of this where they ask their first line supervisors, their sergeants, to do some review of video for the officers in their unit. So in Glendale, each sergeant has to do a monthly audit of at least 3 videos selected at random for each officer who they supervise. Pretty standard. Like I said, most departments do that. The other 2 pieces I think are a little more unique. What they also do, they have an auditing and inspection sergeant who focuses on these last 2 tasks. And for each officer in the department, what this sergeant does is he calculates a ratio each month for each officer using their CAD data, which is linked up to the metadata from their body-worn camera system. And they generate a ratio for each officer each month. How many calls did that officer respond to where there should have been an activation? And then how many videos did that officer upload? And if those 2 numbers are exactly the same, then that ratio is 100% or 1. But if it's not, if there are more calls than videos, you see a different ratio. Maybe it's 75%, maybe it's 50%. And what they do then is that sergeant then contacts the first line supervisors of officers who have low rates of activation. So that's kind of functioning at a higher level, where you're just looking at for each officer what the activation rate is, and then reaching out to officers who have rates that are too low. The other piece of the auditing compliance involves a monthly inspection of untagged videos. And this was one of the challenges that Glendale had early on in their program. They had fairly large percentage of videos that were either not tagged or were tagged incorrectly. And like most systems, they have an automatic deletion based on set time periods. And there was some real concern about losing videos with evidentiary value because they weren't tagged, or they were tagged incorrectly. So now that auditing and inspection sergeant does a monthly review in the system of all untagged videos, and then works with first line supervisors in terms of identifying who's uploading those videos and not tagging them properly. And then you can see, I did a series of interviews with the folks in Glendale, and you can see from the bottom of this slide, they also are focused as part of this review of video on performance. So it's not just about activation. It's not just about following the body-worn camera policy. It's also about leveraging the review of this video to assess officer performance, whether it be performance that is concerning or troubling or not up to par, or on the other end of the spectrum, performance that's exceptional. So that's what I want to talk about with regard to policy. Let's move on to the second piece, which is the flow of footage. So this is the flow chart that Craig described earlier, but this is the flow chart with Glendale's meat on the bones, if you will. Working with Glendale, the easiest way for them to investigate this was to just take 1 month, and we did it for December 2020. And for that 1 month, identify the number of videos that are recorded, and then track those through the system or through the flow chart that you see here. So in other words, how much video is ingested by the department, and then what happens after. So if we move over to the far left, that's where we start. And so you can see in this particular month, there were more than 16,000 videos, or 16,231 encounters where there should have been an activation. And as you move to the right, you can see that they uploaded a huge number or huge percentage of those videos. So that right from those two numbers, you can calculate at the department level an activation rate for this particular month. And it was exceptionally high, on the order of 96%. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But now we can then follow, okay, what happens to those 15,635 videos that were uploaded in December? And as you move through this, you can kind of follow what's happening. So for example, response to resistance, 68% or 68 of those cases involved a use of force by a Glendale police officer. Less than 1% of the videos captured a use of force by a Glendale police officer. 489 of those videos captured an arrest. So about 3% of all those videos captured an arrest, whether a felony, misdemeanor. All of those videos then were forwarded to the appropriate prosecuting agency. There were no citizen complaints against Glendale police officers this particular month. In terms of requests for video, there were 15 from the public, 3 from the media, so not very many. And there was one officer involved shooting this month, and that officer involved shooting was captured on video. Glendale has adopted a very similar process to the LAPD in terms of doing a critical incident debrief, which involves an officer kind of narrating to the public what happened using the footage. So that is the flow of footage. With a couple of things to highlight. So I mentioned the activation rate, and that's high. We've been working with agencies. I talked about activation yesterday, or actually on Tuesday, and I showed some activation rates that were very low. I think the Glendale activation rate is high because of the policy issues I described earlier. They have not had the tsunami of requests for video from the public and media. Like I said, this is 1 month, but they told me this is fairly standard. But I think the big takeaway for me is this last point. If you consider all of those videos that are uploaded and who's looking at them in terms of the compliance checks, the arrest, the use of force, it's less than 5% of those videos, which means 95% of the footage that is ingested by the department is never viewed by anyone. And I think, that's an interesting point to think about. And once we get the flow charts completed for the other departments in this project, we'll see if the Glendale experience is unique or is similar to others. And I'm gonna guess that it's fairly similar. And when I thought about why this might be, and this is the last point I'll make before I turn it over to Cal. Who's wearing body-worn cameras? It's patrol officers for the most part. Well, what do patrol officers do? We have known for decades that patrol officers handle a mind-boggling variety of tasks that, depending on which study you look at, anywhere from 20 to 25 or 30%, no more than 30% of what a patrol officer does involves law enforcement or crime control. The other 70 or 80% is other non-crime stuff, handling disputes, taking reports, providing information. We've known that for a while. The police have a tremendously broad mandate, and it involves lots of other things besides crime. And I think what we're seeing with the review of this flow chart in Glendale is the body-worn camera captures the broad mandate of the police. It captures all of the other things that the police do that doesn't have evidentiary value, that does not result in a use of force or an arrest or anything like that. And that, I think, is an interesting point to think about. And I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. It just is providing some evidence to again show the broad mandate of what the police do. So I think that's it for me, and I'll turn it over to Cal.
Before we go to Cal, I just want to answer, there's a couple of questions and we got a little bit of time. before we get to Cal, but I just wanted to throw these questions out. First one is, where's the data coming from on the number of incidents requiring BWC video? So Mike, do you want to take a shot at, I know from LAPD, it actually is coming from the incident reports that are filed by LAPD officers. So and that's the number of actual reports that officers make and file. The other part would be from calls for service data about an encounter that again are used for that. Mike, do you want to address that question?
Yeah, I think it's the same in Glendale. I think that they're pulling it from, from the CAD data from calls for service, and they're doing this. Like I said, the auditing and inspection sergeant is doing this every month. So it's really just taking the process that's been created for that function and just then multiplying that for all the officers in the department.
And then the second question is, and this will kind of flow into Cal actually, who determines that a video is for an arrest and who forwards to the prosecutors? So who determines that a video is for an arrest and who forwards it to the prosecutors? So go ahead, Mike. I know in LA, I can answer it too. So go ahead, Mike.
The officer who is uploading the video at the end of their shift or whenever they're doing it during their shift is going to tag the video, and it's the tagging that's going to flag it as an arrest. And then there's a process that's set up. I believe it depends a little bit on whether it's a felony arrest or a misdemeanor, but it's going to be the detectives then who coordinate with the prosecutor's office in most of those cases.
And that's the case too in LA. So like I said, if you folks want to ask questions, please do so. I know that we have time for them, so please do that. So I'm going to turn this over now to Cal Chotai. He's going to talk about the work he does in the state attorney's office. And I think, and the importance of this to, I think all of you in the audience too, is that there's only one prosecutor's office in Broward County, and there's multiple police agencies, and there's a lot going on for Cal and the prosecutors he works with. So Cal, take it away.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Mike. Want to touch on the question a little bit earlier that was asked on how do we know which videos go to the prosecutors? And a big part of that is categories and those tags. It's really important that your officers understand what categories to apply on specific videos. Throughout the course of the last 5 years, we've had videos get lost that are tagged inappropriately. So just ensuring that training is thorough and your officers understand when to use certain tags is vital to making sure the evidence is preserved for trial. And kind of building on that, I encourage all of you, all the different sites, to work with the prosecutors. It's far too often that we've seen that law enforcement departments kind of move forward with body camera programs without even thinking about the prosecution. And of course, even videos in your trial phase, that's still technically evidence that we need. So to you, it's just a test video, but for us, that's potentially evidentiary material. So just remember that as you're rolling out your pilot programs and going into full deployments. And so just keeping in mind that, what we do here in Broward County may not apply to you in your respective regions, but I also encourage you to get with your law enforcement agencies in your district, in your region, kind of form a work group, get together, monthly, every other month or even quarterly, to kind of work through issues with your prosecutors, sit down, roundtable it. We do it here. We used to do it every month. Now we're going every other month, but we get together with all police departments in Broward. We've actually even had some guests from other cities and states attend as well. So, if anyone's interested in sitting in one of our body camera meetings to see format, please reach out to me. I'll make sure you get an invite link to our next one through Zoom. But I definitely encourage that. So just geographically, Broward County is in the southern part of Florida. It's the second largest district in Florida. So you've got bigger cities, or bigger counties, but it's one of the busier districts. So Miami-Dade County would be number one. Broward County is the second busiest district as far as crime rates and number of cases that come in through the flow. So then we, like Craig said, we've got multiple agencies, which we'll touch on the next slide. Okay, so we've got about 2 million population count in Broward County. The state attorney's office here in Broward, we've got about 530 employees. That number is always fluctuating, just like with any other prosecution office. There's just retention is always a problem. So making sure you've got a good team, make sure your prosecutors have great teams set up when we're working through receiving and disseminating digital evidence, and making sure that all the prosecutors that we all understand how to access videos and how to play videos and prepare them for court and for trial. But a lot of that is kind of working hand in hand with police departments. Like Mike and Craig said, I know LAPD and Glendale, the way the agencies share evidence to the prosecution is a little bit different than Broward. In Broward, most of the agencies have a dedicated team that actually sends videos to the state attorney's office. It's kind of a handshake that we have within evidence.com, which is what most of the county uses. And so when agencies share videos to us, they come directly into our evidence.com account. So we don't need to request it. For the most part, we don't need to request them, and they're just there for us for review at the time of case filing. We've got 16 individual municipalities, 16 different cities that have their own police departments. And then we've got the sheriff's office, which has 16 different districts that are contracted by other cities. And of course, that includes the airport, seaport, and the courthouse as well. Don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, just a geographic map of Broward County and the cities and police departments within the county. So countywide, taking into account the fact that the prosecution receives everything, we're not only working with Fort Lauderdale Police, who is one of the sites that the research project's going on with JSS, but I also want to focus on the other departments that share body camera video and other digital evidence footage to our office. As of June 17th, we had almost 1.3 million evidence files. So that could be individual body camera videos, dash cam videos, drone videos, interview room videos, documents, photographs, 911 audio, interview room audio. So all of that kind of comes into play, and all that's basically housed in the evidence.com digital evidence management system. And so I encourage you to all, when you're deciding on your vendors to go with, just keep in mind that having everything in one place makes it a lot easier for review of cases, presenting your case to prosecution, and of course for prosecution to be able to find everything a lot more organized. So that 1.3 million piece of evidence was comprised of 102,262 cases. It had contained about 1.3 million pieces of evidence. So we get a lot of cases. This is just exponentially compounding number. So if you've got storage costs or storage concerns, keep that in mind. Prosecution offices, a lot of you may be able to work out deals, and I know with our vendor, we're not paying anything because we're the prosecution, but these are obviously numbers that you need to pay attention to from the police department standpoint, that your numbers will compound as time goes on and your data will aggregate. So since June 24th of 2020 till today, or from June 24th to June 17th, we had 24,612 cases come in that 1 year span, and then 451,404 files have come in that 1 year span. So we had a little bit of slowdown during COVID. Police departments were less hesitant to initiate stops and take action. I'm sure that was kind of the case all over. A lot of things were kind of lax with regards to enforcing municipal ordinances and less serious offenses. So we did see a decline throughout that 1 year period. So yeah, as Craig mentioned, we have multiple agencies, and oftentimes the agencies kind of work in tandem with each other in certain scenarios. You could have a multi-agency response in a critical event. You could have neighboring agencies cross over into different jurisdiction to effectuate a stop or to assist another agency. We've got in Broward County, with the DUI BAT facility is housed by Broward Sheriff's Office. So could very well have a municipality record their own body camera video for the actual DUI stop, transport the subject to the Sheriff's Office BAT facility. Then we'll have a Sheriff's Office case number for BAT video. So it's important to kind of understand what different case numbers mean, how they come into play in prosecution, and more importantly, making sure that it's all disclosed to defense. Florida's open discovery, so we have to ensure that we're disclosing everything, the existence of everything, to defense when it comes to time for discovery. So just making sure that all of our prosecutors, they understand that, hey, look, on a DUI, you very well could have multiple case numbers if you've got a city case. always look out for a sheriff's case on a city case for DUIs. So they kind of know that, and kind of going through your paces and training programs, you'll learn what nuances you have within your own circuits and your own counties. We do have some statewide agencies. Florida Department of Law Enforcement, once in a while, will come into play. While they don't have body cameras, we do share videos with them pretty frequently. We've got tribal agencies, Miccosukee and Seminole Indians. Florida Highway Patrol is another statewide agency, Fish and Wildlife. So there are different agencies that do have body camera, and just understanding and making sure prosecutors understand how to request those in a timely manner are also very important. I know some systems, some vendors have retention schedules that are no longer than 30 days. For example, Florida Highway Patrol, their dash cams, within 30 days, those videos are gone if they're not requested. Same goes with Florida Fish and Wildlife. So just making sure that the nuances, everyone understands those concepts and they understand the retention schedules, is going back to training is the most important thing. So one of the bigger issues for our office has been redactions. Public records requests have been voluminous. We've got a lot of media requests coming in. We had a lot during the civil unrest back in 2020. We had a lot during some of the protests that were going on. Just the volume was just intense. So ensuring that your public records department is staffed, they're knowledgeable on how to use redaction software, and that if they're able to, statutorily able to bill for it, definitely bill for it. Put in that, go and submit your request, go and submit your invoice early, so you ensure that your requester understands that there's a cost associated with it, and this is your cost. And as long as they're okay with it, then you can move forward with redacting. You don't want to spend 30 hours redacting a video and then the requester says, hey, no, I don't want it. But so, for Marcy's Law, it's become an issue that oftentimes we'll have a police officer offer Marcy's Law exemption on a case that traditionally wouldn't need a Marcy's Law exemption. You could have a petty theft. And while, Marcy's Law was intended to protect victims of crimes, oftentimes there's no protection needed on those, but some of the police officers are offering it, and it just causes an issue for prosecution and police departments when it comes times for public records requests on those videos. You're now conducting a redaction on something that doesn't necessarily need it. And I'll give you a quick example of it. One of our sites for Lauderdale Police Department, their intent to prosecute form is also in the same form as Marcy's Law exemption. So if they want to opt in for Marcy's Law, it's on the same form as, hey, do you wish to prosecute? Yes. Do you wish for Marcy's Law exemption? Yes. So they're basically just filling out this one form, marking yes, 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 signing it and being done with it. So please make sure that if you do have some sort of Marcy's Law in your state, recommendation is to have a separate form for Marcy's Law. Make sure your victims understand what they're signing before you just offer it to them. Again, as I mentioned, Florida is an open discovery state. So pretty much everything we have, defense gets. So that results in a lot of issues with special unit cases. You will have sexual battery cases, domestic violence cases, some homicide cases where video statutorily cannot be released, even to defense and discovery. So a quick example of that is autopsy photos. In the state of Florida, autopsy photos are not discoverable and are not released to defense and discovery. So that's usually exempt or withheld. So we have to make sure that those are stripped out of our case in evidence.com before we share it to defense. Domestic violence, sexual battery unit. You could very well have a victim who's in shelter. They're at a women distress facility or a battered women shelter. They don't want to release their address. They don't want any kind of geotag location going out with the video. A lot of officers have body cameras with built-in GPS, built-in cellular data. A lot of those cameras will pinpoint the recipient of that video to the exact location where that recording was taken, where that interview was taken. So you could very well have an incident that occurs 2 weeks later. A detective goes and does a follow-up statement, takes photographs on scene at a women distress shelter. That GPS location being on, now you're basically providing defense or the defendant the exact location, geo coordinates of where that location is. So just some security to be aware of. We've actually been very fortunate in Broward. Our police departments have turned off geolocation on their tablets that they use to take photographs and statements on. So while I do understand the importance of GPS from a police perspective, it's definitely dangerous for prosecution, especially when it gets released. And of course, the importance on training and understanding disclosure laws and public records laws, that'll always remain a top priority. I caution everyone to get together a robust training program on public records laws. Make sure all your prosecutors understand it, and make sure your support staff understands it. Okay, so one of the roles that we have as prosecutors, we have to ensure that we're providing digital evidence timely to the defense and of course to courts for preparation of Arthur hearings, or you could have situations of Rachel's Law where you need to redact something prior to it going out. So there's a lot of things that need to come into play, and a lot of considerations have to be taken before we release stuff. So making sure that you coordinate timely delivery is very important. We tend to deliver everything through email link, download link is what we're choosing in Broward County. Very seldomly will we burn stuff to disk unless it's for court or for trial. We also are incorporating in evidence from witnesses and victims, so we can actually send a unique upload link to a victim. You could have a situation where you got a victim on scene at an event, and the victim was afraid to talk to the police. Maybe they're in a neighborhood where it's not acceptable to talk to police, or whatever the situation may be, where it comes out later on that they had video or they have photographs or something, and they want prosecution to have it. We have the ability to send an upload link to them and say, hey, go ahead and send it to us, and we'll review it for our case. So having that ability is really, really great. If your vendors have the ability to allow citizens to upload files to you, I definitely encourage that. Okay, and just a real quick recap here. The body cameras have been great in Broward County. We're noticing that a lot of our cases are resolving out more frequently. Depositions are quick, you're in and out. Police officers are spending less time in depositions. A lot of cases are resolving prior to trial. You've got diversion programs. As soon as defense sees the video, they want to send it to diversion and they want to resolve it. So all parties save time and money. It ends up being a win-win for everyone. And of course, you've got transparency, which is what the public wants. I think that's it. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask away, and we're happy to answer and help out.
Okay, thank you, Cal. Thank you, Mike. We do have about 5 minutes left, so if you do have some questions, that would be great. Put them in the chat. I do have a couple of other questions here that we can answer. Unless there's someone who wants to raise a question. Okay, let me ask a couple to Cal and to Mike in terms of the challenges of sharing footage, not just from the prosecutor to or from the police to the prosecutor, but also maybe perhaps across police departments. Is that an issue at all? Do you see that as an issue, Cal or Mike, in terms of sharing footage from police to police, or even from police to prosecutor?
So here in Broward County, our police departments do share amongst each other pretty frequently. Broward Sheriff's Office actually maintains the regional communications dispatch for the county. So most of the county utilizes the Sheriff's Office communications. So all those 911 calls, CAD reports, they're recorded by Broward Sheriff's Office, but they're shared to the respective police department so they can build their case and share their case. So that happens pretty frequently. And we also have situations where you'll have, an out-of-county assist, or a out-of-city assist from Sheriff's Office or from specialized unit, who will then share that video to the arresting agency to then share with us.
And they do that off the platform, or they burn discs? What are they doing to share them?
So the agencies that use evidence.com do it through the platform. If one of our cities uses a different vendor, they actually, in fact, have to send us a download link, or send a download link to the originating agency.
Okay, Mike, what about Glendale?
Yeah, Craig, in Glendale, the sharing of videos with the respective prosecutors' offices happens the same way that Cal described it, that evidence.com handshake. So it's the sending of a link, and then the prosecutors are able to download it. And who sends the link, like I said, will from GPD will depend a little bit on the case and whether there's a detective involved. The sharing of footage with other departments, Glendale, it didn't come up as a challenge. Glendale shares borders with the city of Phoenix, as well as a couple of other smaller jurisdictions. So I know that there are numerous cases that involve, arrests that are made across that border, and Glendale and Phoenix officers will be involved. I suspect Phoenix is an Axon user as well. That sharing happens the same way with the sharing of the link, but it's not something that came up as a challenge. So I suspect that when it does happen, it's routinized and it's not an issue. Okay.
And then just the last question here is, have you experienced a rise in public records requests in the last year? So, with the George Floyd protests and perhaps more police activity that might have been involved with the protests? Did you see any increase in Glendale with that, Mike, or in Broward County as well? Mike, what do you think? Anything in
It didn't come
Glendale?
up. Like I said, when we looked at the flow chart, we were focused on 1 month, but in the interviews that I did, it didn't come up as a problem. So I suspect that if there was a bump or an increase, it was fairly short-lived.
Okay. How about Cal? Did Broward County see an increase? I don't know if you would have gotten any requests at all, but it mostly through police agencies.
Right, so I know Fort
for
Lauderdale Police Department had a bump. They had an increase in theirs just,
Okay.
for that month or two. Here at the state attorney's office, we didn't really have any. And of course, it's unlikely that's going to make its way to us. Usually the public wants to see it right after it happened, and we wouldn't release that
Okay.
right away. So I know Fort Lauderdale Police had a little bump though.
Okay.
Craig, one other
Go
point
ahead.
there. I think Cal mentioned the impact of COVID on police officer activity and the flow of footage. I think that may have trumped the impact of the protests, just because there were in Glendale and elsewhere, there were fewer formal interactions between police officers and citizens, fewer arrests, and that probably neutralized any sort of increase that might have happened as a result of the protests.
Okay, good. All right, so here's our contact information. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to email us, ask questions. We're happy to respond. I know I am. I think in the next couple of months, when our report is finalized and becomes available, we'll probably post that on the BWC website. We may also alert you to it being available to you. The other thing I want to mention, and I don't know if it's been said before either, but the toolkit and other resources are available. And if you have any questions about that, we're available for those as well. I know Mike has created a number of documents related to policy, as well as to the research that's available out there. And so there's a lot of information that we have currently, so please make use of it as best you can. And if you have other questions, please let us know. I think that's it. Jessica and Rachel.
Well, thank you so much to all of our speakers. Thank you, Craig, Mike, and Cal, for such a wonderful session. And obviously, everyone loved it, especially due, just to all the engagement. So it was really wonderful, and we're really looking forward to the report that you're going to put out. As everyone's talked about, there is such a tsunami of digital evidence, and I think that people can definitely benefit from a lot of the training and technical assistance that you'll be providing.